Welcome to the HR Uprising podcast. This podcast series explores HR hot topics and challenges through conversations with relevant experts and real-life HR, learning, and OD professionals. The HR Uprising is about learning through collaboration and evidence-based action. We want colleagues to have the confidence and skills to rise up through their organizations by delivering real, lasting business value. Now, introducing your host, chartered psychologist, experienced change agent, entrepreneur, speaker, and coach, Lucinda Carney.
Hello and welcome to this week's HR Uprising podcast. I'm your host, Lucinda Carney, and this week we're going to do a masterclass on resilience and stress management. Now, I feel really honoured to have an ex-international rugby star, Charlie Hodgson, with me today, also from Sale and Saracens, for those of you who are rugby fans. And now you're a corporate wellbeing coach, Charlie. So in a great position to share your insights, which I guess have come through your career, but also what you do with people in the business world now, in terms of how you can basically help us to be more effective by looking at our wellbeing and resilience, I guess.
Yes. Well, thanks for having me.
You're very welcome.
I wanted to be able to use my experience for my rugby career in a different form. And I think I always enjoyed the coaching and the mentoring side as a player, working with the younger players coming through. And so I wanted to be able to use that interest in coaching to be able to work with people in a different industry. I didn't want to stay in rugby. I wanted to do something different. And I guess the idea of working with people within business was the next best thing. And certainly through my career, there were a lot of times when you have some good moments, you have some amazing moments, but of course you also have the pretty crappy moments as well. And a lot of that is down to managing the anxiety, managing that stress for performance. And at times, certainly earlier on in my career, there were times when I really struggled to be able to deal with it, to be able to cope with it. And so through a little bit of luck, I think, from just a bit of trial and error of working out how I could do it, and of course now working it and understanding a little more, I'm in a better position to be able to, I guess, use that credibility from my career and talk about my own personal experience, but at the same time back it up with the academics as well.
So were you given any support in terms of learning about resilience when you were out there? Because I can't imagine anything harder really than going onto an international sports stage with everybody looking at you and also hopes of everybody behind you.
No, you're not. No. Well, actually, you are now. I think back in the day, when I first started playing, I mean, the game had only been professional for a few years, and I think this idea of sports psychologists and team psychologists, they were around, but there was very little knowledge of the impact that they could or should have.
So you had to fend for yourself.
So it was very much about work it out for yourself. I certainly made a lot of mistakes from speaking to the press and being probably honest about my appraisals with the press, at which point things are just getting erupted in the media, and then I'm getting hounded all the time because of my performances, all this sort of stuff, and then the impact that therefore has on family and me being even more introverted and all this sorts of stuff that's going on. I mean,
I think that's really timely. At the time of recording this, obviously this recording will go out in a few weeks' time, but we've had the whole sort of the Caroline Flack being hounded, to suicide, and there's a much more of awareness, I think, of the impact of press on psyche. Doesn't mean that it's less so, but we're a bit more aware of that. So you had that in your own.
Not to say that I wasn't hounded from a personal point of view, but it's certainly when they're talking about your performance and you getting comments left, right, and centre from lots of different people, and then at the age of social media, when that kicks in and people are having their own individual input into what they think of your performance. If you start to read these things, it really has an impact on what you do and how you react off the back of it. And like I said, when I initially, it was I'm introverted by nature, so I'm never always going to be the most outspoken person. And when all this happened, and the press went to town on me about my performance, it almost caused me to be even more introverted, and then I'd withdraw myself from social situations and It had an impact with my girlfriend, who's now my wife, but like loads of things are going on. So not only did you see the impact on the field, but you're realising this impact it's having externally. That's also
so you internalise. So I mean, I'm not sure whether that's exactly the same as introversion in terms of the thing, but you also internalised any of that sort of angst and pain, I suppose. So maybe because you deal with it internally rather than talk about it.
I dealt with it internally, and I didn't share with anybody. Perhaps the person I should have shared with most, the sports psychologist at the time, was somebody that I didn't actually get on with, so that doesn't help either. So you're looking at the person who you should be speaking to, actually you don't want to speak to. So that's why I think there was definitely a lot of trial and error in that stage of working out, well, what does work, what doesn't work, how do I manage the situation to the best of my ability so that that's not going to impact my performances week after week. Rugby's brilliant in the sense that you've got 7-day turnaround from game to game, or 6 days, so you don't really have much time to dwell on what's just happened. Before you know it, you're into something else, and you have to just get on with it. So,
but by getting on with it, you've got to be able to switch on the game face. You've got to be able to move into it, make sure that at a low-lying level, you're not undermining yourself, I suppose, internally, which that's the key, isn't it, in terms of this resilience, being able to turn it into positive and flipping these round.
Yeah, I mean, you're always going to have that negative side of us. We all have it. We may come to it, but we're talking about this chimp paradox that Dr. Steve Peters talks about. Our chimp brain is 5 times more powerful, so we're naturally going to pick up the negative impact of things more than we do the positive. So if performance isn't going well, if you're being impacted by something, we always think of the negative side. So it's important that we try and change our mindset to be able to look at it in a different light. To
flip it around. Great. Okay, so clearly you're in a really good position to take us through this masterclass, and I suppose for the benefit of listeners, what we've talked about before that you're going to share with us are ways in which you help clients, and you've learned this yourself in terms of how you can recognise signs of stress in yourself and then also manage resilience. So there's a few techniques that we can all do. Thought about so almost techniques we can do ourselves, then techniques, then not so much techniques, our environment, what we can control about the environment and the people and the things around us that's going to help us, and just really mindset and other strategies that we might be able to do to enhance our resilience as individuals, whatever our role. We're not all on the rugby field, but we've all got plenty going on. I suppose this is a good point to point out. You've also got 5 children now with the girlfriend and wife. So, I know that a lot of our listeners are balancing, family commitments with work commitments. And at the end of the day, we're one person. So it is about whole life resilience, isn't it? So that's great. So, all right. So when you work with your clients or with yourself, what are the signs of stress, or what drew your attention, or when do you know something's happening?
The first thing to look at is this idea of perceived pressure and stress. So we feel pressure, but it's an external thing, whether it's workload, whether it's the distractions from other people, or so that pressure comes from an external source. Stress comes on because we internalize it in a way that we want to. So for one person that sees pressure in one sense, will deal with it in a different way. We're all very different. So one person that sees, sees one thing that is a stressful situation, actually for another person it might be absolutely fine.
That's about mindset, or almost their sort of frame of reference around that particular situation.
So it can depend on situation, it can depend on the type of person they are. We are different. We're ultimately very different people, and we all react in different ways. So it's understanding what that pressure is and how you start to internalize it. But what I will say is that regardless of whether you're on a rugby field and you're kicking a ball at the post, or whether you are in a hospital, whether you are in a busy office, our stress reactions are the same. Internally, they are the same. Physiologically, they are the same. So, being able to pick up on the cues that you may see and even hear in what you're saying, things like, God, that makes my blood boil, for example. The types of things that language that you're coming out with, you're going, okay, well, I'm now starting to get stressed about something, and you start to recognize it in yourself. Likewise, from a physiological point of view, does your heart rate start to go a bit faster? Do you start breathing a bit faster? Do you start to get fidgety, or do you start to talk more? For myself, I probably go quiet and I start to internalize things. So it's
and I talk more and faster.
So this is it, isn't it? So it's understanding those cues that you might see and hear what you say, and then go, okay, well, this is starting to happen. consciously, what can I do about it? Because most of the time it's such an unconscious thing that's going on. Our stress reaction is an unconscious thing. So until we turn it into the conscious side and go, this is what I'm learning about myself, this is what I know about myself, then we can start to act in a different manner.
So the first point is recognising that something's happening, as opposed to just following a traditional pattern of behaviours. It's taking that moment to stop and recognise that actually probably I behaved in that way because I was feeling stressed, or something that was causing that response that I was interpreting in that way.
Yeah.
Our starting point. So let's say I've noticed that myself on something, because I felt a bit under pressure on something I've got to deliver today, funnily enough. So one of those things, I think for me, I do feel maybe my breathing gets shallow, and I think I've noticed my heart rate starts, not helped by having a really large coffee. So I'm not sure it's probably the worst thing I should have had a chamomile tea. What would you recommend that I do, or if we're find ourselves in a situation, we recognise that starting of that stress response? Yeah. What do you do?
I'll give you a very brief. I mean, I'm not a scientist either, but I'm going to give you a very brief bit of science. So our autonomic nervous system within our body is part of peripheral central nervous system, but it's the autonomic nervous system is responsible for involuntary bodily functions like breathing, like a heart rate, like our digestive system. And that is split into two parts. So we have our sympathetic system and we have our parasympathetic system. I can't speak. And when we feel threat, when we feel stress, the sympathetic system kicks in, and that is when your heart rate starts to change, your breathing starts to change. But certainly internally, it's your stress hormones, cortisol and adrenaline, they go through the roof. Okay, so we need to somehow be able to switch that sympathetic system off and activate the parasympathetic system. And actually, consciously, the only way we can do that, there are lots of different ways that we can do it, but actually in the moment, it's just purely through conscious breathing.
Oh, really?
I was listening to the radio on the way here actually this morning, and Chris Evans was talking about the 4-7-8 technique of breathing. People who are insomniacs swear by it because it's one way of shutting down everything, reducing those cortisol levels within our body, reducing our heart rate, reducing that breathing. Well, you have to reduce the breathing because it's a conscious effort to do it.
So what's the 4-7?
So you imagine you breathing in for 4 seconds.
Yeah.
You hold your breath for 7 seconds, and then you slowly exhale for 8 seconds.
Right.
So that's only one style of breathing. There's another one that the military have used, which is called box breathing, which in essence is breathe in for 4 seconds, hold your breath for 4 seconds, exhale for 4 seconds, hold your breath for 4 seconds. If you imagine you're going to follow that around, follow around in a square, in a box. So there. I mean, if you look on the internet, there are lots of different ways of doing it. But the important thing is to understand if somebody's triggered you, if somebody's caused an issue with you, or like say you have this something going on later on today, and you feel like your heart rate's starting to go, you can actually spend 2 minutes of this conscious breathing that's actually going to settle everything down.
I suppose things like these apps and stuff help you with that, don't they? The thing that's different to me about that is normally you just think about breathing as being in and out, don't you? It's an in, hold. Yeah. Out, hold the out breath.
And actually some of it, the start of it comes from your belly as well. So if you think, sometimes when you're thinking about shallow breathing, you might just breathe and you can just feel your rib cage expanding.
Is that here?
But actually if you're breathing in deeply, you open up your belly as well, and then you can open up your rib cage and you can actually take more air in.
Yeah.
And it's a deeper breath.
Yes, and I get that. But is it important, this sort of holding it in and then, rather than just breathing in and out, is that important, that sort of holding the breath in or holding it out?
I don't know that personally. I'm not too sure. I'm just going on what the experts tell me. So yeah, I guess I can only use it from an experience point of view. If I look back to my playing career, when I was kicking at goal, actually one of the main things I used to do was breathe. Like the times if I was kicking, I could feel my legs shaking, and I know I actually need my legs to be able to function properly. One of my coping mechanisms was actually that breathing in that moment.
Of course, yeah.
Because of course it settles everything down. I didn't realise that at the time, but of course having seeing it now, you kind of go, okay, well, that makes sense now.
It's interesting, actually. Years ago, I did some NLP training, and I did a thing about anchoring, which is kind of conditioning yourself to be in a certain state before you're doing something. And I thought about if I was going to do a presentation or go on stage, and mine was something to do with taking basically a deep breath in.
Yeah.
Which actually is probably quite a sensible thing to do, because it slows you down, it calms you down, resets you. It means I'm not going to be quite a million miles an hour and speak a bit more slowly. So actually, unconsciously, probably. Yeah. I've done that a little bit in the past.
Just to go on to that, you hear a lot about mindfulness and meditation, and it's about being in the moment. And if you are concentrating on these breathing techniques, you are in the moment. You can't be thinking about what has just happened, which can cause stress with people, and you can't be thinking about what's going to happen in the future, which also causes stress with people. So you are very much in that moment. You're very focused on that 2 minutes, 3 minutes, however, 30 seconds, whatever it may be. But you're very much in the moment of allowing yourself to be conscious in that at that time. Hence
the benefit for sleeping for insomniacs, I can imagine, because a lot of the time if you're awake in the middle of the night, it's your brain is racing on things. So what you're doing is just focusing on something other than those anxiety thoughts.
I mean, I'm personally a good sleeper, so I can't comment. But just even listening to the radio, they're saying people who are insomniacs swear they can get to sleep within a minute of using this technique. I don't know that. I can't prove that myself, but if that's the case, then it's very powerful stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously sleep we're going to talk about as well, aren't we? Because that's the key part of our well-being. And if you're not sleeping well, and certainly I go through phases of doing it and otherwise, and I will try that technique because I'm one of these, I can fall asleep, but then it often can wake in early hours and churning stuff. And definitely that impacts my ability to think clearly, although I might also be able to function work-wise, but then I might be more likely to get grumpy with the kids at tea time. So I noticed the difference in my sort of, you can hold it together in certain circumstances, but the cracks start to show elsewhere, don't they?
Yeah, and I think even when you talk about being with the kids, I have 4-year-old twins and they fight like hell. And sometimes in the moment when they are going crazy, actually to remove yourself and to spend 30 seconds just that conscious breathing and then come back in the room, you go, I'm in a better state. I'm in a better state of mind right now to be able to deal with this.
Yes.
Without just flying off the handle and having that reaction that nobody
and
wants.
Then everyone's all jangly, aren't they? And it's not great. Is there anything else though? Okay, so the breathing is the fundamental thing that we can focus on. Anyone can do it. It doesn't have to take a huge amount of time. You can do it anywhere. What else would you do about managing stress? I mean, certainly when you talked about those external factors coming in terms of media and stuff, do you choose to try and block those out? Or are there other things that you'd recommend for people?
There's one. It's managing those distractions. So if you're talking, if you're trying to be productive and trying to finish a piece of work, and yet you've got your inbox flashing up in front of you, and you're thinking, should I reply to that email or not? You've got temptation of social media. People get a little bit bored of what they're doing, so they want to pick up the phone and start looking at the news, whatever that may be. And then ultimately, what happens then is that whatever you're setting out to do in the space of an hour suddenly becomes an hour and a half, becomes 2 hours, and things then get stuck, then get put off. So there's a delay in when you're finishing things, and it's that. I guess it's that external pressure of feeling like your deadline is now starting to get closer and closer and closer.
Absolutely.
And that's when that starts to cause the anxiety in people.
Yeah, it's that classic sort of taking control of time management and prioritization, isn't it? Because there's so many more things that can come and interrupt us now. So 20 years ago, if you trained someone on a time management course, it was just about shutting the door and stopping people from coming and interrupting you. But now people can interrupt you. Our mobiles are probably the biggest thing, but anywhere there's electronics, we've got things that can come in and flash up at us, aren't there? So, and of course, although those are hugely useful, not only we're a bit addicted to them as well, aren't we? So I think there's almost this, isn't something we get a bit of an endorphin or dopamine hit of this sort of thing, which then creates that.
I was listening to Simon Sinek talk about mobile phones for kids, and he was saying the dopamine hit that they get from the likes from Instagram and Snapchat and whatever that may be is the equivalent of us being alcoholics, which is frightening in a sense, because he said we're just encouraging this behaviour, addictive behaviour from a very young age with phones and with technology. So he's almost saying that we as parents are failing our children by giving them this opportunity to have it, even though everybody has it. And then there's the peer pressure to. And
in fairness, many of us are as guilty of that as our kids, though, as well, aren't we? In terms of the interruptions of these, which then, of course, compounds into the fact that then you've been interrupted, you've picked up your phone and done something like that. And I was told my daughter's revising for GCSEs, and she's aware she's got an app which is quite good, which actually if you pick the phone up, it's like Leaf or something. Basically, if you pick the phone up when you're supposed to be working, her plant dies. So you have, because and there was something else I saw about this where they were saying that even having your phone around you on your table, it was on a TV program, makes you slightly less effective because you're consciously you're having to use self-discipline not to pick it up, and I guess get the dopamine hit. So
and when actually we talk about multitasking, we're not very good, and women obviously probably are more than men, but we're not very good at multitasking at all. If you want to give your full attention to something, it has to be that thing and that thing only. And unfortunately, we do get distracted by things, which ultimately then delays what we're trying to do, and that's where this added pressure comes from.
That's an interesting one, actually. I was just wondering. I don't actually know whether women are better at multitasking or otherwise. Certainly, we're getting pulled in different directions. Do you? I think often multitasking, you can feel quite stressed when you're doing it, or invigorated, depending, because it's the same. It's the same thing, isn't it? Whether you quite like doing that or not, I suppose. Is there a difference? Are you aware of any differences between male and females in terms of stress responses and resilience?
I'm not. I think obviously everybody talks about the fact that women are more capable of doing it. I guess I look at it and go, if you really want to give your full attention to something, then it has to be that thing only. It's, and you talked about picking up your phone when your daughter's doing GCSEs or revising, and you might be having a conversation, but if you're looking at your phone, it's like, well, are you engaged with the phone or are you engaged with your daughter? So, and it's that kind of thing. Regardless, male or female, I think if your mind is on something else, you're not putting 100% into being as productive as possible. And if you imagine from a working day point of view, if you think you could reduce your day by half an hour because you haven't picked up your phone, and you've been productive in those moments when you are working, I think I'm in a better space of mind you'll be when you leave work at the end of the day. Yeah,
absolutely. And you've got that extra time to do the things you want to do, as opposed to trying to play catch up, which in itself makes you stressed because you've not done all the things you wanted to do. So you talked earlier about the sort of chimp thing, our stimulation by negatives, are being drawn to sort of negatives. Also talked about when you were, say, preparing for a kick or something. One thing we've said there, if we want to be more productive, feel more resilient, it's about getting things done so we can breathe. It's about getting things done. We talked before about preparation. Is there anything else you'd say about preparing for productivity?
Well, you could, I think preparation gives us confidence to do whatever we want to do. If you imagine walking into a meeting and you've not done any preparation whatsoever, then you can open yourself up to questions from people which could throw curveballs at you. So important that, and of course that's another reason why we get stressed, is because we can't cope with that moment in time. So you go into whatever it may be, if you feel prepared, then at least you go into it with the confidence that you want. And also you can talk a little bit about visualization. We use it a lot in sport. I used it a lot from a goal kicking point of view. I didn't have to be out on the field. Who was I listening to recently? Tony Robbins, I think. Have you come across Tony Robbins? And he was talking about doing some work with the LA Lakers basketball team, and they did a little study on practice and on visualization. And they had 3 different groups. One group didn't do any practice at all at throwing free throws. The other group did 60 minutes a day of actual practice, and the other group did 30 minutes a day of visualization, so no practice, but just imagining for 30 minutes that every single shot they did was perfect. And when they came to test, obviously the group that didn't do any practice were the worst group, but between the other two, it was the group that actually visualized them succeeding was the group that was more successful. I
find that a really interesting exercise, because I play netball a bit, so shooting, and sometimes shooter as well, and I find that I negatively undermine. I was thinking, why is the mental practice better than the physical practice as it is in that example? But I suppose it's because you don't get negative. You don't miss in the real one.
So in that 60-minute practice, you're going to have to go through moments.
You're reinforcing your missing as well, aren't you? Yeah.
Of poor technique, or you get tired and things start to change. At least in that 30-minute visualization exercise, you're feeling strong and you're feeling perfect in every single one that you do. And how that ball flies through the air, for example, it's exactly the same. It swishes through the net. So
Of course, I think visualising for 30 minutes must be quite hard.
It must be very hard. Because
your brain would go somewhere else. So you've got to be pretty disciplined to keep
completely,
that.
Yeah.
But going on that point, but taking it to the business context. So I'm on a number of networking groups, and obviously our audience here, a number of them are HR, well, majority are HR. And I notice quite often, particularly standalone HR professionals have quite stressful situations that they have to go into. So there's always examples where there was one that someone yesterday was worried about over the weekend, because they were going to go into almost a sort of mediation meeting between a line manager and the employee. And they knew that this employee always gets really irate, gets off the, starts shouting and things like that. And they just knew it was going to be a high conflict situation. So I suppose that is a real example where or it's likely that something's going to be tricky. You've got to deal with conflict. So maybe visualizing, we can do our breathing.
Yeah.
But in terms of preparation, visualizing being very calm and collected, a positive outcome.
Yeah, visualizing what you want to say to them and how you want that conversation to go, and ultimately, if you do that, what's their reaction going to be? So
and preparing the words, absolutely,
exactly,
right sort of things.
The preparation that gives you the confidence to be able to deliver that message in the way that you want it to come out, as opposed to just thinking of catastrophizing the worst case scenario the whole time, and naturally, it's going to get that way. So somewhere, if you think about best case scenario, somewhere it's going to be somewhere in between. But the important thing is that you actually you think about how those conversations are going to go with somebody.
Yeah, so think about how we want it to go, because it's the whole thing about self-fulfilling prophecy, isn't it? So if we visualize a positive, then we can almost work back from that and think, okay, so what might I have said to influence them, as opposed to if you just go in and react, sometimes we look back and go, oh, that wasn't the right thing to say.
Yeah.
We just shoot from the cuff. So we can have those rehearsed calming statements, or
it's also remembering that you can't control what their reaction is going to be. You can try your best with what you say and what your body language is. If they're going to fly off the handle, that's their problem, not yours. So as long as you feel like you're in a comfortable position personally to be able to deal with that, because you've prepared, because you've visualized perhaps that moment happening, you're going to go, okay, this is going to happen, I'm all right, I'm good with this.
Now I think that's a really good point, actually. And I wonder if that is a little bit maybe of a female-male thing sometimes, that we almost over-empathise. Actually remembering that it's that's that individual's behaviour. It isn't personal to us, and it actually isn't really anything to do with us. It's to do with what's going on for them.
Yeah.
So we can have empathy for them, but we don't have to take on that emotion personally.
It comes back to controlling what you can control.
Yeah.
If you feel like you are in that meeting and you've done everything you can to make sure the outcome is as best as it can be, how they react ultimately is down to them. It's their prerogative, not yours.
Yes. So good advice to control what we can control. And again, something you can control is who you interact with, I guess, as well. The people that you have. You talked earlier about you might have got more support. The person that maybe you could have gone to for support, you didn't have a great trust, you didn't have a great relationship with necessarily, you didn't feel like it was the right person. Certainly, I think having a right network around you can be helpful. I know we've talked before.
Yeah. Well, even research says that high-performing teams and even the best relationships out there, they have a positive to negative ratio of 5 to 1.
5 positives to 1 negative.
Exactly. So,
as in an interaction or crossword or
exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, everything that you may have from a day to day, whether that's email interaction or just physical interaction, as long as those interactions are 5 times more positive, then you start to see the benefit from a cultural point of view. And it links in nicely to surrounding yourself with positive people. It's just as negativity is infectious, so is positivity. And you surround yourself with people who are positive, it makes you feel the same. And it's just human behaviour, isn't it? We like to be around people who energise us. Well, no, I do anyway. Yeah. And so by doing that, it just helps you deal with situations in a more positive frame of mind. So
restrict the timing, I suppose. In the workplace, sometimes we can't control that. Again, that example we had before, but making sure that you've got that positive support network outside of that.
So you can't control what other people are like, but you can control who you want to be around with. You're going to have those interactions with the negative people, because it's just the way it is. But at the same time, if you gravitate to the positive people, then of course they're going to help you with your own positive frame of mind.
And it's about recharging your batteries with those positive people, which makes you therefore more resilient, doesn't it, in terms of those spiraling up or spiraling down, I feel, in terms of that.
And you mentioned recharging your batteries there. I mean, you come back to what is probably the most important thing, which people neglect, is the idea of sleep. And where you get your most recovery from your day's stresses, whether that's being at work, whether that's family, whether that's exercising. If you're not recovering at night time and having the quality of sleep that you need, your energy levels at the start of the week to the end of the week are going to be very different.
Or day by day, even. Sleep.
Completely. Yeah.
Do you see that sleep kind of, there's an overall deficit? Is it day by day, or do you see that you kind of end up overall drained?
It depends. It depends what your lifestyle choices are like. It depends how you choose to respond to certain situations, and that's this idea of, if we go back to, stress is going to be everywhere, and we're all going to experience it. The important thing is being able to understand when it's happening, to be able to switch off. Because if you don't, it becomes this chronic state, and therefore we don't recover, and then therefore it impacts the quality of sleep. But if through the day you experience something that is a stressful situation, as long as you remove yourself after that for 5 or 10 minutes to be able to recharge your batteries, you can finish the day in a similar frame of mind.
And so recharging your batteries might be taking your weight, going for a dog walk, or it might be going to do some exercise, or it might be talking to a friend, or it might be planning for the following day. I suppose it's whatever is the right thing for you, which allows you to sort of channel that and set yourself up for success.
We're all different, so we all have our own ways to cope and deal and manage. And if it is getting outside and getting some fresh air, if it is going for a walk with somebody, if it's meeting up with friends, doing some exercise, whatever that may be, but it's being selfish enough to prioritise that needs to be in your diary.
Yes.
Rather than being a slave to your desk and sitting at your desk for the whole day and not having those moments to recover, chances are then it's going to impact your sleep quality because you're still thinking about work when you finish.
Because you've been something funny, I think sometimes you don't realise that someone's been a tonic. You're around people, you've had a good time. Say, actually, that was a laugh. You thought it was something quite flippant, so something lightweight, but actually you feel that it's been a tonic. You've been around someone positive, you've had a great conversation, you've had a good laugh, you feel better. And it's making sure that those aren't seen as luxuries, they're actually seen as part of the things that we should be doing to actively recharge ourselves.
Completely. It's I said selfish before, which, whether it's right or wrong word to use, but it's just important that you recognise that what the things that give you energy, and actually put them in your day. And if it is,
and keep them in your day, isn't it? That's the sort of, sometimes. For me, solo exercise, I probably have to do earlier in the day, because otherwise I'll talk myself out of it. But I find that team exercise, I'm more likely to go and do that, in the evening, because of the fact that there's a team thing. And the great benefit I think I've found only later obviously you've been doing this all your life, but only later doing old person's netball, was that you can't actually worry about work while you're playing something competitive. Whereas actually if I'm at the gym, I could do, unless I'm distracted by it, because your brain's still doing something else. Whereas actually if you're reacting to something, it's almost active relaxation.
This is the beauty of exercise, that you have to be in the moment. You can't be thinking about the past or future. If you make a mistake, it's like, well, it's gone, I can't do anything about it.
Actually, I suppose that's also because let's go on to what you do currently. But because although you're not a fitness trainer, obviously you've got a great caliber of what to do there, and I know that you use exercise sometimes in your work, don't you, to help people relax? And certainly, I'm thinking if I'm in the gym and someone's making me do things, it's much harder for me to go, oh, this is really boring, because you're being moved on to the next thing. It's more, there's a social element.
Yeah.
How do you do it?
So I initially trained as an executive coach, but I always thought there was a piece missing to create that self-awareness in people. And given my background in sport, I then came across a program that was created by a Dutch lady, which in essence uses sport to create that self-awareness in people, recreate situations that will cause stress, understand how that manifests itself in the office or at home, and then obviously learn to be able to do something about it. So whether that is dealing with confrontation, whether that's managing your time, dealing with distractions, managing reactions of other people, you can do all this with exercise. I can assure you it's not a boot camp, but it's just merely a tool to create the self-awareness in people.
So how would that work then? So let's take our conflict example that we had earlier. Someone I know have got to go into a conflict scenario. How would you recreate that with a physical?
I don't want to go into too much detail, but it's understanding it's understanding the fight and flight response.
Right.
Have you come across that?
Yes.
So some people may know that that's what they do, whether they immediately fight back or whether they freeze and just don't react at all, or whether actually they just want to get out of the room. Mm-hmm. Some people may know that, but I will reproduce that situation using exercise, if that makes sense. I'm not going to go into much more detail.
So you're going to come over the boxing gloves, now fight, am I going to fight back?
There's different ways of doing it, but there's certainly boxing techniques and martial arts techniques as well. I'm not an expert in boxing or martial arts, as I say, because it's merely the tool to reproduce those situations. Yeah. But ultimately, the most powerful piece of it is understanding, or is the self-reflection. So, okay, well, if this is your reaction, it's quite clear this is your reaction, because you can't write on a survey to say this is what you would have done. You've just shown me exactly what you do, and that's your default reaction. Yeah. You can't hide from that, which is going back to the exercise, why you say you can't be thinking about the future, you can't be thinking about work. It's the same idea. You're in the present and the moment.
It's quite primal, right? Fight or flight, obviously, is a primal response. Yeah. And if you were to, I don't know, swing at me, or metaphorically in the workplace or in the gym, am I going to come back to you or not?
So it's understanding what your response is, but then also understanding, well, how's that going to help you at work and how's it going to hinder you?
Yeah.
So if you are somebody who is confrontational and you're willing to fight back immediately and you don't really take a breath to think about what my reaction should be, what's that going to do for your relationship with that person?
Yeah, what's the consequence?
What's the consequences going to be? And also bigger picture, how does that look if other people have seen it? So it's, like I say, it's the powerful piece is the reflection piece, actually understanding, getting to the bottom of it.
But it's quite it's a metaphor, and quite a tangible one, because you probably bring the feelings out and the emotions out quite quickly because you doing it physically.
And this is the idea of understanding physiologically what's going on in our bodies as well. You can fill in a survey and say this is what I would do and blah blah blah, but unless you really feel it internally, if your heart rate's going, if you start to get tense and you can see yourself going, you can recognise those things in the office. It's the same thing when you're outside and you're exercising. You'll start to do something that you start to feel it in your mind and in your body. So if you're recognising that there, you start to recognise it when you're in the office. And if I just bring those two together. So the idea of exercise and also to be able to implement the learning, it's this idea of short-term, long-term memory. So if you think our minds are only capable of holding between 5 and 9 things in our short-term memory before we just spit them out because there's too much going on. So in order to store it in our long-term memory, we have to create an emotional attachment to an experience of some sort. Like when you go to concerts and you see the music going on, you kind of remember those moments. So it's just like in the coaching side and using exercise, I'm just going to create an emotional attachment to this learning so that when you are faced with it again, and whether you're in the office or at some other time, it's actually been stored in your long-term memory so you can actually do something about it, which makes the coaching impactful.
I can see that. I can definitely see that. It's much so. It's not traditional coaching, although you deal with the same issues, business issues, wellbeing issues, whatever the deal is. You're a qualified coach, but you're sort of deepening the experience, maybe accelerating it by bringing physiology into it.
Sometimes there is a shock factor with it. I think sometimes, certainly with when you're having the traditional conversations, coaching conversations, it can take a while for the penny to drop with some people. But if you can produce that moment with exercise in the space of 10 minutes, then it's good learning.
Good time management. Get the outcome as well that you're after. That's great. So, I think we've covered quite a lot of what we talked about prior to this in terms of how we can be more resilient and overall well-being, the links with exercise, something that's it's all in our control really. So we've said it's about breathing, it's about mindset, so reframing things, it's about surrounding ourselves with the right people. There's something perhaps we didn't cover, which I know we've talked about before, which is maybe it's about moving forwards, not getting stuck in the present. Although you in order to deal with the stress, you have to be in the moment, but there's also something about not dwelling on things,
it's just simply asking yourself the question, is this going to matter in a week? Is it going to matter in a month? Will it matter in a year's time? And if you answer no to those questions, to those time frames, then you kind of go, okay, what am I worrying about now?
It's a good strategy because I think there are some people who are sort of on the can get more anxious. Some people have more of a sort of anxious tendencies, and often when they're like that, what they're doing is they kind of relive it. They relive and rethink it. Almost they must be reprocessing it and therefore getting the anxiety going. So actually that whole sort of saying that to yourself could be quite a good anxiety management strategy for, will it actually
and to add to that, just give yourself permission to fail or to make mistakes. we as children, that's the way we learn. So for some reason we become adults, and then we get this inhibitor in us or something that's just holding us back to go, I don't want to do that anymore, just because somebody might say something or they might react in a different way. So if we allow ourselves to make those mistakes and just go, do you know what, shit happens, well, let's just move on. Will it matter next week? Will it matter in a month's time? Ask yourself those questions, and then it's the frame of mind thing again, isn't it? You're in a better frame of mind to move forward. It
really is. And I think there's something there which almost goes full circle to what we were talking at the start, is that be kind to ourselves, but also be kind to other people. Let's allow other people to make mistakes. And I often think that in the workplace, people who are tolerant of mistakes or nice to themselves are, they're prepared to say sorry. Yeah. Then actually, I think some of them often the most, I respect them more, if you like. So I'm sorry I made a mistake. I apologise, I shouldn't have said that. Having the courage to do that and almost be that self-accepting, and we should do it to ourselves and we should do it to others, and that's a good way. Yeah, so you've just reminded me. So I shared something yesterday on social media, and it's a quote from my wife's great-grandfather. Oh, wow. So this is from 1934, and he owned a very successful department store up in Bradford, up north. And there's a book about the department store, but one of the quotes in this says, "Form the habit of finding fault with your own work rather with that of other people. Look for the best in everybody, honour what is good and strong, imitate what is worthwhile, and with a breath of kindness, blow the rest away." Wow, so that's almost 100 years ago. Yeah. Wow, we could learn from that, couldn't we? Yeah. That's a great place that's a great place to summarise it. Yeah. And also, you're saying you would put that out on social media. So, Charlie, if people want to find out more about what you do, contact you or follow you on social media, how would they get hold of you? So I mainly use LinkedIn, to be honest with you. So I'm very active on LinkedIn. I do have a Facebook page, Charlie Hodgson Performance, which is it's there, but it's not really that well used, really. But as I say, LinkedIn's my main way to get out there. And have you got a regular website? I have a website, charliehodgsonperformance.com. Right. Which needs a little upgrading as well, but be kind to yourself. I know, yeah. It's true, isn't it? It's true. And do you use Twitter or anything else? That's mainly LinkedIn. It's mainly LinkedIn. Great. Yeah, business to business. So obviously we'll put all of the links on the show notes for anybody. So if they want to know more about what you do, because you do it corporates and with individuals, don't you? Thanks so much for coming on HR Uprising, Charlie. Thank you very much. Thanks for having me. Cheers. Cheers. Thank you for listening to the HR Uprising podcast. You can access more information, including resources or links mentioned in the show, at our website, www.hruprising.com. Also, you might want to join our LinkedIn community or tweet to us at HR Uprising. We'd love to hear from you.